Let me make sure I'm pronouncing your last name correctly.
We're live.
Bustanera?
Yeah. Did Matt tell you? Did you cheat?
No.
That's pretty. You might be probably like the first person ever to
Make
get
sure
it.
I'm pronouncing your last name correctly.
Amen. Amen.
Bustanera?
Yeah. Did Matt tell you?
No, Matt's Generation Z, so we already gonna talk about him tonight.
What?
You all hear me fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Let's try this again.
Hey, so we already gonna talk about him tonight.
What?
You all hear me fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Try this again.
Hey, so we already gonna talk about him.
What?
What's happening? You all hear me fine?
Yes.
Give me a second.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
are trying something new tonight, people. I'm not sure what's happening. You all hear me fine? Well, we are wait a second of
Yes.
delay tonight, people. Sorry, y'all. All right, no talking. We're gonna try this one more time to upload. It looks like it says I'm live here. Okay, let me just double check and make sure. If you are watching us and we are live, hey, we are doing something new today, and we just want to make sure that everyone is on point. So just give us 2 seconds and make sure that we are streaming properly, and we're good. All right, let's see. If you are watching, oh yeah, we're good. Hey, it's me, your Jesus loving Jersey girl, and it is time for another conversation with Dr. Sam. As per usual, we are looking forward to you for your participation on tonight. As you see, we are doing something a little differently today. We have several guests involved in our conversation on tonight. And so we are looking forward to a very robust, exciting conversations about intergenerational communication. And we are glad that you have joined us on this evening. So if you should have a question or a comment, please make sure you send a message to us. You can do it via the live chat, or you can do it by texting me at 609-353-6559. Again, you can text me at 609-353-6559, or you can put your question or your comment in the live chat section. We are so glad that you have joined us on today, and we are going to make our way through this conversation with all of these great minds that are in the Zoom room with us on tonight. We have different generations represented here: the silent generation, the baby boomers, Gen X, the millennials. And so we are excited about what everyone is going to impart to this conversation on this evening. Now, if you have a moment, make sure that you give us a thumbs up, like the video right underneath our picture there, and share the video with someone. Let somebody know. As a matter of fact, get your entire family involved, because this conversation is integral to every single member in your home. So make sure you call somebody or text somebody and let them know that we are on live with a new conversation with Dr. Sam. We're still on our quest to get 1,000 subscribers. You can help us if you make sure that you send this link to your family and friends and ask them to subscribe to our channel. We would greatly appreciate it. It's really not about monetization for us, but what we are looking to be able to do is to go live from anywhere, so that we don't have to be locked in studio all the time to go live, because Dr. Sam has some really insightful things that he likes to share on the cuff. And we aren't able to do that per YouTube's instructions and their rules and regulations unless we have 1,000 subscribers. So help us out in that quest, and we greatly appreciate it. You can always check out our website at www.famecbrownsmills.com. And while you're there, click on the More tab, click on Shop, and check out our Living Stream store. That way you can cop that merch and represent the conversation and get you started outside and about talking about it. And so you might get another subscriber for us that way, right? Okay, we have some really awesome hoodies and long sleeve t-shirts and stuff, because if you haven't noticed, fall is here. And so we need those items to keep us warm. We have some nice mugs and notebooks that you can take to church or wherever you want to take them to write your notes down. So come on and support the channel by getting some merch from us as well. You can stream us here on the YouTube channel, or you can take the conversation with you wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Spotify, Google Cast, Pocket Cast, and repeats of our show are on Level Up Radio every Sunday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we will make sure that we put that information in the comment section so that you can click it and be able to watch and view at your leisure. So again, thank you for joining us on tonight. We are excited about this conversation. I'm going to let everybody, per usual, go around the studio, say hi. When we come back, I'll pray, and then we'll start this conversation about intergenerational communication.
We're going to do a little bit different tonight because the way we're going to go around, as you guys can see, everybody's here. And we're doing something, as you said, new compared to the last 3 years, and having this type of a forum on Zoom where everybody can have a more interactive type of a conversation. We are very grateful for the people who have decided to join in with us on this evening. We have a great focus group here. We've been talking now for a couple of weeks to try to put this thing together. The reason why this came to life is within the last 3 years, or just before, or just as COVID actually started, everyone really started generating these online presentations. And in those presentations, we started to learn different things about ourselves, not only individually, but we started learning things intergenerationally, because we were forced to become more intimate in our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We were forced to become more involved in really giving an understanding that probably would be able to connect across generational lines. And when we did that, we ran into difficulties. We ran into difficulties within the church. We ran into difficulties on the street. We even ran into difficulties here in the studio. We found out that this piece of communication really has a barrier that is not easily discerned under normal conditions. Because under normal conditions, what we do a lot of times is just block out different portions of conversation that we just don't want to hear. And we continue to just push with our own agenda. And many times you guys can attest, and we will all be able to attest to it, we do that to a degree to where we're not receiving, we're giving, no one's communicating, and no one's getting the point. And eventually confusion sets in and everybody just recedes back into the background. That's the reason why we wanted to bring people in from each generation. We have folk from, we didn't get one for the greatest generation, who I love very dearly. I know a couple of them, but we decided not to really mess with them with this technology. The greatest generation are folk who were born between 1901 and 1924. We do have a couple of people from the silent generation, and these were from 1925 to 1945, 46. Then we have baby boomers, which is the absolute phenomenal generation. And that is the ones who were born from 1946 to 1964. I can attest to that because I am the last of the boom, and there have been no other creation of God that has the way we have moved this planet through the universe. Then we have Generation X who have really just held on for dear life to our coattails, so that they can really pretend like they were doing something, but really they're just living in our echo. They were from 1965 to 1980. Then the millenniums. None of us can stand.
Nice.
But we all get along with them from 1981 through 1996. Then the Gen Z. The Gen Zs from 1997 to 2012. He's already licking his lips, getting ready to respond. And I really am depending upon Erica to smack him on the back of the head if he gets too out of the way. We have Generation Alpha. That was another one of the generations. I thought long and hard about it. I prayed about it, and I said, well, we're going to draw back. And if we do this again, I'll bring in a Generation Alpha. But I really need to have somebody that's going to, at that age, have that degree of patience and articulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to put somebody at that age at a difficult position where they would be confused and not actually enjoying it. So I'm going to introduce everybody. me, Dr. Samuel Hayes, and the pastor of Friendship AME Church, we really have had this program going on for 3 years. I'm grateful to be again yet in your household and joining a Wednesday evening with you. We have Donna Hayes. As we go through, they're going to say their names and they're going to continue to say hello to you. I'm just going to tell everybody's name as we go through. We have Maurice Tyndale. Oh, he's a millennial. We have Dr. Deborah Tillman, a beautiful baby boomer. And we have Matthew Preston, Gen Z. And we have Erica Buscanera, Gen Z. Bobby Peterson, Silent Generation. Laverne White, Silent Generation. And we have Sandra Acevedo.
Sandra Stern.
Sandra Stern. And she is, I'm going to put it as Generation X.
Yes.
Amen?
Yes.
So, and I'm going to say a couple things about this discussion, then I'm going to take a step back because I know that everybody's really having a point of anxiety. You know, I've been thinking about what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, how I'm going to fit in. So let me put some landmines and some tidbits and some little manna out here on the ground for us to pick up. When we think about communication, we first start with family. Family is the first place of communication training.
Mhm.
You receive that communication training from your parents, from your siblings, from your cousins, your uncles and aunties, and that goes with you. What a lot of people don't realize, even if you try to escape that influence, that shapes you for the entirety of your life.
Right.
You may add to who you are, but you cannot detract from the conditioning and the love and the nurturing that your family has put on you. So it will always be in place. It may not come out consciously a lot of times, but subconsciously in the way you relate to other people, you may have different things that you're not even aware of, or you may even think that you're creating something new, and somebody from the old school family may come and say, you do this just like your great auntie.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that we have that's a part of our DNA that we're not aware of. It's communicated not only on a physical level, but guess what? We communicate on a spiritual level as well. And that communication is just as powerful because it moves across generations that are no longer here with us. Yes, you can hear from your ancestors. So we're talking about, though, the difficulties that we have when we're listening to each other from an intergenerational perspective and the struggles that we have, because we not only listen to different music, we read different books, we have different teachers, we have a lot of things that have been in our lives that are so different that it is no wonder that we have these challenges. Please know the challenges are really something that is not going to go away. Even we have challenges within our own intra-generational grouping. But when you start moving outside of this and you're talking about a 20-year period and start trying to talk to somebody else, look how much change actually happens in that 20-year bubble and how really conditioned you become in that 20-year bubble.
Mhm.
So now I try to carry on a conversation with somebody who's not been in that bubble. It's a whole different language.
Mhm.
And not only with the language pieces, that how it begins to break down. And I know from just my perspective as a boomer, when I grew up, we were just wanting to be heard.
Mhm.
Because the silent generation came before us, used to smack us in the mouth. Children are supposed to be seen and not heard. But we wanted desperately to be heard, and no one was listening. So we came out and we became this generation of communicators and facilitators, really putting out who we were and describing ourselves in very detailed fashion because of that gap that has existed from a child perspective. And we really, from the baby boomer, and I really want to point this out, we struggle with the fact that the generations before us and the generations after us, in my opinion, they like to hold secrets.
Mhm.
And we don't know how to deal with secrets when we're trying to be open. And that's really been problematic for me. and because I remember even hearing when I was growing up that people would say quite often, I'm going to take this thing to the grave with me. Well, don't take it to the grave. Talk about it, because the way it affected you, it will affect me. And I need to be able to engage it and then prevent any type of difficulties that may be blindsiding me in the future. We struggle with authority because each generation believes that the generation after them should do what they're told by them. I mean, I know for a fact that I struggle with our children, and I feel even though that they're very grown, that if I speak, they should listen. And then I had to check myself a lot of times and saying, you know what, they don't have to listen. They're grown. And they're very empowered to do what they want to do. So I have to really take a step back and say that authority is no longer mine. It belongs to the individual and it belongs to God. But there are a lot of people who can't let that go. And we hear different things like my mother used to tell me, I'll be your mother, you'll always be a child under me. Well, the reality of it is that we have to stop these type of informational carryovers so that we can begin to have a conversation with each other that is meaningful, that is open, that is inviting, that is intellectual, that is educational. I would love to be educated more on generations that I'm not a part of because I know so very little about them. And that's the reason why I can sit in the car with Matthew and let him be so disrespectful, because in my mind, he's not, in his mind, he's playing, but in my mind, because I was raised, it's disrespectful. But if I shut it down, I'm preventing communication. And I would never want to prevent communication because look at his face. I want to see that smile every time I meet him. But if I start shutting him down, that smile will be gone and he will stop talking to me. So that's where we're at, the authority piece, and how each generation is always trying to reinvent themselves, but you cannot reinvent yourself until you learn who you are. So I said that piece, and there's a lot of information, everything is out there, and I'm going to let it not calling on people, but if somebody just want to join in and just start having a dialogue about where we're going with this thing.
So I love that you started with secrets, because, I think a lot of times when we think about, our parents, the people who raised us, we have to think about where they came from, right? And so there's this whole sense of community, kind of coming off of slavery a little bit, still having that weight of slavery and really trying to pull it together. And so what that brought was a lot of perfection, was a lot of our family is together. And so it kind of, obviously, like you said, children will be what they see. So when we are raised, the baby boomers, when we're raised in a generation that has secrets, then we either shut down, right? It could be that, or it could be, I just want to be heard. And then you're a loudmouth, like you're always talking, right? So it's one way or the other way.
One way or the other. And here comes the punishment right after you say what you have to say.
Definitely a punishment, a spanking, a harsh something, right? Because we could hurt kids in a number of ways. It's not just physical, it's also mental, it's emotional. I often like to liken it to our words, our ABCs, right? So our attitudes, our behavior, and our character. And so oftentimes when you look at parents, and they did the best they can. So this is not a slight on parents. They did what they knew how to do, right? But like they say, when we know better, we do better. So when we look at the attitudes of parents, they were just raising us the way they were raised, right? And then in their behavior, we took, I'm not going to raise my kids that way. And so what happens is that the next generation gets the weight of us saying, we're not going to treat our kids like this. So what are we going to do? We're not going to be so hard on them. We're not going to criticize them. We're going to respond instead of react. We're going to connect with them instead of, criticize them. But then that breeds another generation of kids that then just get trophies for playing.
Yes.
Right.
Dr. Tillman, how did you respond early on when you engaged as a professional woman and you had to overcome the conversational yoke that was placed on you growing up. I had to speak with authority, but I've not been given permission to speak with authority as I was a baby boomer, and that was not allowed.
Yeah, so I was the middle child, so that's a whole nother ball game, right? And so I always felt squeezed, right? So you had the older child who spoke a lot and was very connected to the parent, my mom, and then the younger child, they're the baby, so they're the baby, so they always get the attention. And so the middle child kind of feels like, first of all, I'm not being heard. Second of all, you got the firstborn, I get the hand-me-downs, and then it's the youngest one that gets everything. And so I had to fight. I had to fight to be heard, right? And so a lot of that was, growing up with kids who didn't like me. I didn't have a lot of friends because I was always trying to be heard, right? And I never learned to balance that out. You need to listen as well.
Yeah, I think that because I'm kind of on that, I'm right after the baby boomers, and the recipient of being the youngest. I think that the thing about being the youngest for me was the act of that authority, because the authority always came from everybody, right? So you didn't just get the authority from the parent, you got the authority from the siblings as well. And then in receiving that, just kind of being sort of, bounced from lap to lap, from arm to arm, and then sort of not really having what Dr. Sam said was the reinventing of yourself, but you got to first learn who you are. So you learned who you are through the eyes of others, right? And then it subsequently ended up for us that are you, and this is kind of true, and I'll let Sandra, come in after me to tell me if this was her experience, but it kind of rings true for some of my friends, where we get to this space where we are so indecisive. We are so unsure. We are so, looking and searching for, well, where am I? Kind of going any which way the wind blows. And you have to come to that understanding of, wait a minute, I've got to find out who I am, instead of me always trying to make and please the other. Because if I don't, and a little bit of what Dr. Sam touched on, if I don't please them, then they're going to be mad at me. If I don't, make and do what they say, then they're going to think, that all of my decisions are not good, they're wrong, or what have you. So I think that we in that generation S kind of fall in that space of teetering between, the baby boomers and millennials, in that even to that point, we were considered disrespectful, right? The generation X was like, y'all's mouths are way too smart, you're too much talking back and that kind of thing. But I think it was really a part of fighting for a voice, trying to find who you are. And that was the struggle. Sandra could speak to if she agrees with any of that, because she's the other X in the room.
It's funny because I'm listening to all the different representatives of the generations, right? And you almost want to say that because you were born in a certain generation, you have these characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
But in my case, it may be a little bit different or muddled, because I was raised by my grandparents. I was by silent generation. So the mind frame is a lot like the baby boomers, but also coupled with our generation X. And I can relate totally to Donna, because I can tell you, I grew up in a household, I was the eldest. But when Miss, is it Professor Deborah or Miss Deborah?
Deborah, it's fine.
When Miss Deborah was speaking, I wasn't allowed to speak. I just had to do what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the indecisiveness, me and Donna, I totally get it. Not until you're older and you're more comfortable in learning who Jesus is and who your identity is formulated in, is when you get to know who you are, is when you get those decisions, is when you get to be able to have an opinion. Because as a kid, I wasn't even, and no shade to again, our parents did the best that they could. But I wasn't in a household that said, oh yeah, you're free to be whatever. No, you're free to do what I told you to do. You're free to clean up, you're free to, and yeah, you're here in this household and you're lucky that you're here. You know what I mean? So I totally get it in terms of how the indecisiveness, the not knowing who you really are, the not
Just
even
put,
eldest, you know?
Then just real quick, I want to say one quick thing is that to add to that is that the thing that happens is once you do develop the sense of self, once you do find your voice, then there's a whole nother battle in that, well, who are you? It's like,
Yes.
that whole, like, now it's a real difficulty for everybody to adjust to that because they're not accustomed to that individual. But this is who I am. This is me. Like, I found me and I found my voice. So yeah, it's another, stream of like trying to make it work.
What was it?
may I interrupt a moment?
Mhm. Sure.
Listen to Sandra, and she has said that she was raised by her grandparents. And I can understand what she said that, you had to be quiet. And also I understand that, as the pastor had said earlier, that we were not allowed to talk about the secrets of the family. We had to, don't say anything to Aunt so-and-so or whatever. And also we were allowed to think, but we couldn't speak. And you better not speak. And if you did, you would get that left hand or that right hand. And also, as I said, you could think, but you couldn't speak. And also, if you showed any body movement, like shaking your shoulders or sucking your teeth, as they said, or rolling your eyes, you get that left hand again. So we had to be silent. We couldn't speak. And may I say this also while I'm talking? I think a lot of it came from slavery. When the master told them not to speak, they didn't speak. And some of that I believe, I know for, because the way that I was raised in the part of the country that I was raised in, they brought that to their homes. Now, first of all, they gave the elders their respect. But at the same time, you still could not say what you really wanted to say, even though you knew it was right and they were wrong, but you dare not speak. So I'm from the generation of silence. And I find myself sometimes even now that I'm at this age, I'm still a little bit nervous about speaking. So I say for that generation, yes, we could not speak. We had to hold our peace, whether it was right or wrong, and also out of respect for our elders. So as I'm so glad to be a part of this group and to hear all the different generations and what they are going through and how they have learned, and also to say that the parents or the ones who was nurturing you, they would say also, which I think went up to other generations, is that you don't do as I do, you do as I say. You don't speak unless I speak to you. And I could give you some stories, but we'll just go on from here.
We have Matt and Erica here with us, and I'm just very appreciative of the fact that they decided to join in with us on this conversation. And I hear us talk a lot about the post-traumatic slave syndrome that we all experience. But I believe that some of this is so universal that these issues are cross-cultural, because even in white America, when I talk to a lot of people that are European descent and don't have the slavery heritage, they have all of the same issues that they're dealing with and that they're struggling with. It may not be triggered the same, but they are existing in the exact same fashions where they feel, depending upon the generational category, seen and not heard, or heard and not seen. I would tell you, even I loved it was when the two Gen X's was talking, that they were almost transparent. Generation X.
Mhm,
We forgot they were even there.
mhm,
I mean, they existed, but they were just so forgotten
mhm.
that they were just passed over. And when both of them said it was this oppressive authority cloud
Mhm.
that really came from above, and it came from within, and it came from beneath. And it seemed like Gen X was transparent, and you guys are still in the midst of an incredible struggle or fight.
Mhm.
I want to bring in Mac and Erica on this thing and see how they respond to it, because I know Matt said he had to leave early on, but I want to know from a Gen Z perspective, and to include into the conversation, does this feel indifferent? Does anything we're saying feel like, hey, this is a Black problem, not a white problem, or this was a problem that we experienced across the cultural lines as well?
No, absolutely. I think everybody brought up a lot of great points, but I know, like, for me, my parents are very like old school New York Italians, like they all grew up, their parents being immigrants.
Mhm.
And I can't speak wholly to their experience, but from like stories that my parents have told, it's a lot of like very similar, like, you know, your place as a child. My dad talks a lot about how like his dad would like get the belt out and stuff that like I can't imagine going through, and it's stuff that he talks about like very casually because it kind of is just like what was normal. And I think I'm fortunate enough to grow up in a time where I wasn't treated like that as a kid, but there's definitely remnants of that. And as I kind of go in, like you said, and I'm trying to figure out where I came from and unravel who I am and go through the way I was raised, there's definitely elements of that kind of like, you don't talk about your problems. It is what it is. You keep it to yourself. And I think like coming from those generations where you don't talk, we're kind of the exact opposite of that now with the internet and social media and things, which have such a huge, like, we're the first generation to grow up with that. And now everybody has a platform to say whatever they want all the time, for better or for worse, but it's
Right.
changed so much in such a short amount of time, where you've gone to like, people like being a child and not being able to speak your mind, to now you can go speak your mind at any time of day and everybody knows what everybody else is doing all the time. And I think that transition has kind of happened so fast, even in my life, from when I was a kid to kids now, that I think it makes a lot of those communication issues worse because we can't even keep up.
Good point.
With you guys being overwhelmed, I got a question for you guys. If you can kind of like give me a little bit more on this. You have 5 layers ahead of you that are still living and breathing.
Mhm.
How have you fought for existence in the midst of all of that? You have generations on top of you who basically would tell you in a heartbeat, it doesn't matter what you think. We've done it, and we were going through this stuff. Just, you know what, tighten up your bootstraps and then press on. How you guys address that, especially you, Matt, because you're in the office every day complaining. We're not complaining, but talking about these same issues.
I'm not complaining, but you know, like when I'm at home, it's like I complain about one thing and I just get told like, you know, we've been through it, suck it up. You got to stay quiet about it and like respect your elders, this and that. But it's like, you know, I look at it as like, why do we have to be quiet and respect somebody if they're not going to give us that same attitude, that same energy back? If we say something back to them, it's a big commotion. But then they could say whatever they want to us. And it's just, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you didn't grow up in the silence generation, because you would have been on your back or your knees all the time.
I wouldn't have
But
been
you have
silent.
a right to speak. I give you that to you, because I think everyone has the right to express their opinion. But in my generation, we were not allowed to. We had to think, but don't speak.
Yeah, I still get it where, like, you know, I can't really say anything. That it's just like I gotta throw it behind my back and I just gotta keep going. Which I don't think it's the right way to go about things. But it's, you know, you go to one person, it's like how they're raised differently now. So if like you have friends like they're raised by their grandparents, they're raised to not talk about it. Then there's other ones that are raised by, you know, other people, and it's just they're allowed to talk about it, they're allowed to say things. It's just different worlds colliding with different ages and all that.
I think one of the things we have to realize that when we're raising children, that I think it's something that you said at the beginning, Sam, that it's not just knowing what your generation is and what value you bring to your generation, but really doing a deep dive into the other generations, right? We grew up in the 60s. I was like, I don't know, 3 years old when Martin Luther King died. I grew up not seeing, but feeling the Vietnam War, feeling demonstrations, feeling like stuff going on. Like you didn't know what was happening at 5 and 6, but you felt the energy of the room. And I think it's really important that when we're raising millennials or Gen Zs, that it's not like we're stereotyping. We shouldn't stereotype, really seek to understand them. We should listen to them, and we should find the value in what they have to offer, like building bridges as opposed to walls, right? When we come together with our wisdom, when they come together with what they have, technology. I mean, those kids, y'all are like this on the thing. I'm like,
I'm not even that.
now, a period is something that I write at the end of a sentence, but y'all are like, period. Like that's the thing, that's the bomb. And they were like, I'm on my Zoom. I'm like, why would I be telling somebody I'm doing a Zoom call? Like total different language, right? And so we have to seek to understand you all. The only way we're going to be able to connect and come together.
I remember about when I was growing up, what you said, that even as a child, I was able to test the spirit in the room. And I've learned that over time, that's a lasting spiritual audible sound. I remember these great moments. Nobody talked but the spirit of the room. And I can still, where I go into a room and I try to figure that piece out first before I start diving in. Let me see where everybody is on another level and then start engaging. But that's not outside. I don't see that outside of our generation.
Erica was about to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to touch on what Deborah said about like trying to understand our generation. I think it gets even harder because I sometimes feel like I'm even behind on my own generation sometimes, because it just feels like everything changes so quickly in the world in general now. Like one thing that's in one day is out the next day, and it's kind of hard to keep track of what's going on.
And if it's hard for you,
Mr. Peterson or Mr. Tyndale.
I would, just say that listening tonight, I think there's a lot of similarities with all the generations. I think that each generation has felt at a particular stage that they haven't been heard, or that their parents were difficult to understand. For me, I was fortunate to be raised by a woman who was a part of the greatest generation, who really had an imprint on me, and her the way she reared us, something that lasts me to this day. But I think that all of us really are in agreement that we all were in households that it was always difficult to navigate from parent to child, and so when you became a parent, you still try to deal with, okay, now I'm going to do things a little differently. But I think it still comes back around that we get to those moments when we are not communicating effectively with one another to understand how each other is feeling. This is where we have a lot of the disagreements that we have, because we say we're not going to do one thing and we do the opposite. And so I think that, Aunt Debbie said something that really resonated with me. It's about her being a middle child. I'm a middle child also. And so in that middle, I have an older sister and a younger sister. And I have always been the person I'm going to say what I want, because you all have been saying it for a long time. And so we all have these things that continue with us through various generations. I just think that in order for us to really understand is to have these open dialogues with the person or persons in another generation, so that we can see their perspective. We may not necessarily agree, but at least we have an understanding. Because a lot of times when we were brought up, we were told something, there was no explanation. It was just do it because I said to do it. And so that's where a lot of the rift comes in, is where there is no explanation. I'm not saying that I have to agree, but if I have an understanding of where you're coming from, then maybe there won't be so much difficulties involved.
But wouldn't that matter on your age of knowing? I was listening to everyone and I was thinking about how I grew up, and there were certain things that you needed to know as a child, and there were certain things you didn't need to know as a child, because they dealt with adults, not with children. Now, I feel, and I've always felt this, that as a child, I was basically a devil as a child.
Oh, gosh.
No, I really was. I would try to get away with anything.
Okay.
And I got a lot of beatings for it. But I always remember my mother and my father would always tell me, certain things are adult conversations, and you don't need to know those things because you're not an adult yet. And therefore, I let it go. But coming up and knowing as a teenager, which you really want to do a whole lot of stuff that your parents don't want you to do, and is wrong, but you think you might be able to get away with it. But I've always felt, and I don't know, maybe it's the way I was reared or whatever, but when my parents told me not to do something, I didn't do it. They would say, well, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'd ask why, and they'd give me an explanation for it. And usually I'd accept it because they're my parents and they better than I did, even though I was a baby devil, and wanted to try everything. So I think it also has a lot to do, not so much with the parents as it is with the child, also having to understand that you just understand that what your parents are telling you, even though you might not understand the reasons at that point in time, it's for the better, because they're older. Well, that's the way I always looked at it. They were older. They knew more about what was going on around the area and everyone else, and what was the safest thing for me to grow up and be the man that I've become.
When did you guys open the vault? I mean, y'all have so much information in your generation that we need, and it still feels like you're not giving it to anyone because you don't consider anybody adult.
Still,
I mean, And it really, a lot of times when I talk to people in your generation, who's probably going to be the same set below me, it's almost like you don't need to know that. Go somewhere and sit down. And it's like I'm all the way grown.
Right.
I can discern that. And I can really put it together. But it's almost like, is it that you guys are trying to protect us, or you just I'm not understanding why this vault remains closed.
I would tend to think that it's, well, you have to, I don't have any children, but I would assume if I had some, you have to know your child. You know, you really have to know him or her, whatever they do. And that way you talk to them. And if you feel like your child, not an adult, but you at his age or her age, can understand from the things that you've been teaching them and everything, then you can open up to them. And I think that's what my parents did to us. We were growing up. They would tell me certain things, you know, that would happen and why and stuff. And I learned, and I said, okay, then it's not a good thing.
I like that. I like that you said that you know, it's age appropriate. I get that. So I understand age appropriate explanations. But what I will say is that it's interesting because I'm going to use this analogy and hear my heart and understand what I'm saying here to everyone. If I can, the word of God says that human beings are a little bit lower than angels, right? If I can have a whole conversation with my dog and he or she understands me, then how and why do we limit the understanding of a human being irrespective of the age?
I can't answer that because I don't like animals. So but
what I want you to, that's for anybody to answer. I want you to think about that. We literally have conversations with, if anybody has an animal, I literally can have a conversation with my dog and tell him, I'll be right back. I'm only going to the post office and I'll be right back. And I'm telling you, while he usually barks when I leave the house, because he's like, I know you're gonna be gone for a long time, right? It's just like when I say to him, I'll be right back, he sits still and he doesn't bark. He understands. I mean, they have this type of understanding. And so I don't mean it to be facetious, but I'm saying, why do we put such limitations on little human beings? And we can explain things to them in a way that they can understand in that age appropriate way.
Well, you have to understand, maybe the parents are not geared to age appropriate and what to make those steps forward. You know, it has a lot to do with the parents too. If they feel that and that they think they're at the age and they at each age that you can tell them a little bit more, which I think is right, should happen. But a lot of parents aren't made that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say that there three things come to mind when you ask that question, Donna. I think one thing that makes it uncomfortable to have a conversation or even to think of children like that, I always say that I think parents think they're raising children when they should really be thinking about the fact that we're raising an adult. When I look at a 3-year-old, I'm thinking about the 13-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about the 13-year-old. It's not necessarily that conversation that I'm having with a 13-year-old, but I'm thinking about how I'm modeling to them and what kind of information they're getting. Now, Uncle Bobby said that, you know, he got a reason why. I grew up in a generation where I didn't get a reason. It was because I said so. That was because I said so. I think oftentimes that the 3 reasons is that they think it's not the way, like a parent thinks, this is not the way that we did it. So because it's not the way we did it, I'm not going to accept you millennials and you Gen Zs and Gen Y and Generation Y. I'm not going to say, because this isn't the way we did it. The other thing is that in my generation, it's more about protocol. We parented from fear-based rather than faith-based. Oftentimes, because we knew what was in the world, it was like, don't do this. No, don't do this, because you got to be better. You got to do this right. You got to do it. That creates anxiety and fear. And if we don't get therapy or some sort of help, we live with that trauma, because that's what it is. And then the third reason why parents do what they do, because I speak to many of them, is that they don't think y'all know anything. I'm older, I have more wisdom, and these young kids, they can't add value, when in actuality, that's a total lie.
Right. And it doesn't just happen with, I think, parents, it happens with older siblings too. You're the youngest, so you don't need to know. You're the youngest, I don't have to explain that to you. You're the youngest, you don't understand, as if we don't have opinions. So it's, what I'm hearing is that that same mindset has trickled down to Matt and Erica's generation, and to the Maurice's generation. But the thing that to me keeps us stuck is when we ask questions of you all, Gen Zs and millennials, and you all don't have answers. Like, we can say we want to have a conversation. So why do you think that? I don't know. Yes, no, I don't know. No, just the kind of the one word type of thing. So my question to you all is, how do we break through that and get you to engage in conversation that goes beyond the one short, one word short answer?
Sister Donna, may I say something I'm sorry, I hope I'm not cutting someone off.
Go ahead.
But sometimes it could be that the parents really don't have the time just to sit and listen, which they should, because if they did, maybe the situations in the world around us would be better than what it is. But with both parents working, and doing this and doing that to try to take care of the family and the household. So I think some of it could be because they just don't have the time and to sit and to listen, which they should, but that's the way it happens sometimes.
Gen Z, millennials.
I think, me personally, I always I'm loving every minute of this. I love to have conversations with people and learn where people come from and what makes them tick and why they do what they do. But it's been my experience. I think this is a very open-minded and empathetic group, and I think this has been a great conversation so far. But for me, I feel with a lot of older people I've met, it's they don't want to talk about it. Or if we have a difference of opinion, at least in my family and some other people, it gets really heated really quick, and they kind of take it as an attack on them that maybe I see things differently or want to do things differently. So sometimes it's hard because I want to have a conversation and other older people don't want to have a conversation because that's just not how we do things, or in that experience. I don't know if you
See, I'm different. If something happens and there's a conversation that needs to be done, I walk away.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to, because with me, it's as soon as it gets brought up, it might be cordial for 2 seconds, then it's a big downfall. So I'd rather walk away from it, just say yes, okay, or whatever, and just walk away. But then sometimes they'll to carry it on and to talk about it. On the other side, when I choose not to, because I know they'll take it as, what she said, an attack, or I'm disobeying what they're saying, and a whole bunch of other things. It'll just lead to a bigger commotion.
But what's the result of that when you walk away? What's the outcome?
For me, there's never a result. There's never an outcome. We kind of just get in that tiff and then walk away, and we just forget it ever happened. There's never a response to hey, why'd you do this? Why'd you say that? I said this. Let me hear what you had to say. There's never a listen. You just kind of hear about it, talk about it, get in a little argument, and then walk away.
Can you forget, or does it become so compounded and impacted that you trigger faster with each ongoing conversation? How does that work?
I tend to not forget. And then the minute something else gets brought up, maybe like a month or two later, I'll come back and lash out harder because I'm just still thinking about what wasn't resolved and I'm still keeping it bottled in. But that never really works ever. So
how are you going to address this? And I'm just thinking, because we're talking about it from generation to generation, and eventually you're going to want to have children of your own. So is this a healthy engagement with your children that you're going to have? And how are you going to now eliminate that way of engagement and then have openness with the child who will give you the same type of responses?
well, for a lot of people, like for me, not for me, like a lot of people I know, it's like they cope better with it when they walk away and don't talk about it. And they do their own thing. Like they might have like a journal to write in or do whatever, like go on a drive, whatever. That's how they get over it. It's like for me, it's like, when I have kids, it's like if that's what they got to do, that's what they got to do. I'm never gonna leave it at like an argument or a big problem. I'll let them know where I stand, and then I'll let them do what they need to do until they're ready to come back and talk.
And the reason why I'm saying this is because you're developing, even at this young age, habits to where is that when you become these upper layers, that you don't want to have these shut down habits, because then they're gonna be like, well, we can't talk to anybody because they just walk away from it.
Yeah.
I think we're also in an interesting position as like young adults trying to start our own lives, but living at home too. Like I just graduated college. I'm trying to like get on my feet, find a job. And it's like, I'm 22. Like I think I'm a fully grown adult. I want to make my own decisions, do my own thing. But then I still live at home. So there's still like a little bit of like my house, my rules, even though in my head, I'm like, I'm an adult. I should be able to, like, sometimes I think I should be able to do whatever I want, which I know that's not the case because out of respect to my parents, I don't want to, but I feel like that is kind of a big point of contention, I guess. Like, it's hard to try to figure out who I am outside of my parents when I'm still like with them all the time.
Right.
Wow.
Go ahead, Sandra.
I wanted to speak to something about that. When Donna was asking and Sam were asking, what do we do? I think it has to really be for each one of us in each generation. It has to be a different mindset. It has to. And I'll speak to Erica and Matt because I have children your age, right? And my rules, my house, you're gonna do what I tell you to do. You got a curfew. They eventually moved out. But I them too, it hurt when they left because we were thick as thieves. It was the three of us for all this time until I got remarried. But it really has to be a different mindset. And I say that because also with Miss Laverne, I know that this is streamed, but it's the truth. I was a single mom for a lot of years and I didn't have the time. I was working 2, 3, sometimes 4 jobs, hustling because I had to put food on the table. I didn't really have time to sit down and really listen to what my kids were going through. And I'm so sorry that I didn't take the time because there's consequences now of not being there for them that I'm paying for, But I really think one of the biggest things is having your mind renewed, is having a different mindset, is taking that time to listen. And also, and I'll say this, there was a prayer conference that I had gone to a couple of years back, and I think the pastor there did a brilliant job in terms of describing prayer, but I think it also can be taken into every part of our life. he said, you have to have a balance between structure and flexibility. You can't be so strict that you break, and you can't be so flexible that you're wishy-washy as well. So I think with the help of the Holy Ghost, with the help of Jesus, in terms of being able to be transformed, to be renewed, to do it the way that he wants us to do it, to be able to listen to what our children are, what the different generations are saying, older generations, younger generations. I think if we have that different mindset, it becomes a whole lot easier in terms of understanding and being able to love one another in spite of our differences, because we are able to understand, we're able to get it. And then also it opens up like, oh, now I know why this person does the certain things, you know what I mean? And then it helps you to be able to connect on a whole other level that you may not have done it if you didn't take the time to listen.
That's good. Yeah.
I would say that there has to be an openness in dialogue. And I think that we say that we want to be effective communicators, but we're not. It sounds good. We say we're willing to listen, but then we put our desires for that person out on the forefront. And I think people build up these layers of boundaries because it comes across as really not listening to me, because you're really going to tell me what you think I should do. And so I think it goes back to that, like I said, we have to be able to go into a conversation and be willing to be open and vulnerable and not allow our feelings to get hurt. And I know it's easier said than done because we have to place so many guards around us to protect ourselves. And we really don't want to have those necessary conversations. So a lot of times people in my generation will say, I don't know. Because if we say the real reason, it becomes a part of, well, I don't think you should do that. I mean, and I know it's not the intent, that's not the intent, but that's what happens because you speak from past experiences that you went through. But I think that, in order for me to develop and learn, I have to go through that experience myself. Sometimes you have to have those battle loops. And I know sometimes it comes out as protection, but when that happens, it gets to a shutdown mode that I don't want to have those conversations because I feel as though people are trying to navigate the path for me.
But why not take the advice and filter what you can use, discard what you can't use?
Take the meat, throw away the bone.
Exactly, because I mean, with the other generations, we were always, I laid under my elders' feet and I absorbed everything they had. And I'm not saying that every generation wants to absorb the experiences of the generations that are outside of their grouping. But what I am saying is that all of us have the ability to sit and take and discard and then put something together, because I think that if we take from the different patterns and we put something together, it becomes our own. It's no longer the person who gave you the advice, but you are now integrating it with your own experiences and with the other conversations that you may be yet having. But when we just say we don't want what somebody gives us, then we're robbing ourselves of the opportunity to take in probably something that's minuscule, but once it's added to the pot, it would change the flavor of your character.
I think part of the thing is too, is to ask somebody, do you want advice? So if you're gonna have a conversation, then okay, hey, I need to talk to you. Okay, am I just listening? Or do you want me to give some input? And I think at that point, we have a better understanding from the door what we're supposed to be doing, our role in it. So if it's just that you want me to listen because you want to vent, then have at it. And no advice going from that point on. I just want to get that off my chest. Okay. And then we leave it alone. But if you ask the question, right, and you ask someone to give you the advice, and then the advice is what it is, and then you take it and you start to, you're like, well, you're trying to project. Is it a projection or did you ask me? Because a lot of times, a lot of our answers, I think everybody in the room here, our answers are based on some sort of some form of our experience, and there are some things I can't tell you that if you ask me, look, that's dangerous, I wouldn't do it. So do we want the advice or do we just want to vent, or do we want to just, as you said, because I hear this a lot, let me just experience on my own? Then don't come to me and tell me. You know what I mean? This is how I look at it from my Gen X perspective. Then don't come to me and share it with me if it's something that you just want to do on your own and have the experience because you're concerned that my experience or my understanding of it may project on you something. Then just go ahead and handle your business. And then if you need me, I'm here. Anybody could speak to if you agree or disagree with that.
Like a lot of the time for like people my age, if we have to like vent, that's not an option. You know, you're gonna get a response back, even if you say like, I just want you to be quiet and listen to me. No one cares. They give you a response, and then that makes it look like as if, you're going against what I said, and then you're trying to give me an option of how I could do better or take it that way when that's not what I wanted or like what anybody wanted. It's just that seems to us like, we're not being listened to because we just want to say what we have to say, get it off our chest, and go about our day. When someone else replies with, instead of making that same thing, do this or do that, this, that, and third. And it's just not what, most of the people my age want to hear. We like to, do things on our own and learn by our mistakes instead of learning by what they have to say, because times are different now. So what could have been the same reaction our parents would have got back then is going to be way different than we get now.
And I think like for me, kind of going off of that, like I'm very fortunate to have a lot of generations of people in my life and have their experiences, but my family likes to have their opinion known. And so like sometimes it doesn't come off as it's advice or it's criticisms, but like their opinions disguised as advice or like under the guise
Dude,
that
it's
it's advice.
huge criticism. It's never an advice.
Yeah. But sometimes like I get so overwhelmed from like having everybody else's advice or opinions that it's almost like difficult for me to sort out what's me underneath and what I want underneath.
Yeah.
What everybody else wants for me.
And like back on like she
Yeah, you sound like us. That's how we talk.
For me, it's like for my family, I could say I could say like how I'm feeling. Then my mom will call my nana, then my nana will call my sister, then my sister will call my aunt, and then my aunt will call my uncle, and it gets all thrown around, and I'm getting not help, I'm just getting judged for like what I did, and it's just massive amount of criticism that like I didn't want to hear.
Right.
So this makes like my problem that happened 10 times worse because they're silently judging me instead of like either listening or just telling me how to help. So it's just a big thing of what they think they're doing right is the complete opposite.
It's interesting.
And two is people always are so big about IQ, and we talked about this before, Sam, that it really is emotional intelligence. And so what we think young people should be able to do, right? Take it and then throw away what they don't think is necessary and keep that muscle has not been built. Nobody taught anybody how to do that. We just know because we had to learn it over a period of 20 years that they haven't been exposed to yet. And muscle to build that whole emotional intelligence where you're not in your feelings, that just because you're disagreeing with me, I can still, take what you said, some of what you said. Okay, if I can use it, I'll use it. If I can't, I can't. But to them, it's like Matt said, I don't want to hear it. And now you told the whole neighborhood, and now it's a big thing that didn't have to be a big thing, all because we didn't do what we were supposed to do in the beginning of the foundation when we were stewarding our kids, not controlling our kids, was to, from 0 to 12, teach, talk, and train. After that, you just listen, learn about them more because they keep changing, and love them through the journey.
So like what you said is, you took things from certain situations and threw the rest out. A lot of it for us is like, we just throw all of it out because we take it as,
Yeah.
Deb, you said something that I have had a lot of struggle with, and I had to be very careful with it, where people that are intergenerational don't understand about me as a person, that they think that I'm probably really robotic. Why don't you smile more? And you don't have enough emotions. And it's really not, that was not a part of my generation to be that type person, because we had to be very serious. We had to be very adult beforehand. And I'm not talking about adult with just, being responsible and everything. No, we had to be adult and accountable. Because while we were adulting, we were being held accountable. A lot of generations, when they're adulting, they're not being held accountable. They get the responsibility, but they don't have the accountability. And when we look at that kind of stuff, it's like, man, okay, that's not really the way I was engaged in that moment coming up. And from a pastoral perspective, because I know we have Pastor Fred is on the line as well. Nowhere else is this duplicated, y'all. Listen, when you go on your job, you have retirements and you have entry level. So you don't have but probably 2 or 3 generations that you're working with. When you go to school, you only have 1 or 2 generations that you're working with. But here, when you're a pastor, you're dealing with 7 generations every time you come together. And it works to this degree. It works because we serve a God that speaks across generations. And I believe that we miss out on opportunity by turning our back to the power of the Holy Spirit, who can articulate. Remember, it tells us that we may not know what to say, but the Spirit and mumblings and groanings across our generations will convey what's in our heart. Remember, God speaks and talks to you in your heart. And I would rather for somebody to know what's in my heart, because my words are going to come out sometimes and they're not going to be very uplifting. I think that's the reason why the whole book of Ephesians was written. Be careful about what comes out of your mouth, because we hurt each other so greatly with what comes out of our mouths. I'm not convinced that we hurt each other intentionally. I'm convinced that when we do hurt each other, the hurt is really born out of just not understanding and not communicating. And maybe that walking away, maybe that throwing away. When a person, a human being, feels like I'm being totally dissed, ignored, cast aside, then we become, everybody across generations, I think I've seen it to where is that we become defensive. I remember early on in the military, my experiences, it was really confusing to me, is that when the new generation came into the military, we made them have mandatory fun. That was the worst thing we could have ever done. We set up barbecues and volleyball games and softball games without realizing they didn't want to do that. But because we over and abused our authority, we made them do it. And it created a very, very bad gap and a very bad situation. It's something that we had to work our way back out of. But I see that being repeated even on the outside of the military, where we try to, even in the church setting sometimes, where we allow not God to speak, but we try to allow religion to speak. And when religion tries to speak across generations, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But when we surrender the moment and let God have his way, then I think that there's I know that there's a power there that really can, as the Bible says in many places, speak to generations. But we have to be there. We have to have presence, and we have to be a part of the body in order to receive that type of communication. And that's where a lot of times that we know what I really believe in this principle in the church where you touch and agree. And I think that's what's missing in the world, in the secular, because we're not touching and agreeing on a lot of things. But there's a need, there's a great need. I'm convinced that as the generations continue to move, that we're growing further and further apart. And it's really to our loss. Because we're losing so much unrecoverable information. And you cannot record your heart on a Facebook post.
Right.
Some things have to be communicated through love. And if we can't learn to love each other, then we're going to reject whatever comes out of each other's mouths. That's going to be automatic. If I feel like you don't love me, it's not a good conversation.
Yeah.
No matter where you stand on the linear scope of age, generations, if you are sitting at your place and I look in your eyes and I don't see love, I'm not seeing a way for us to communicate greatly. So we have to really begin to start addressing issues and of other means and try to use other means in order to cross over into this communication piece. How can I talk to you if you know what, you think I can't stand you, or I think you can't stand me? There's no communication there.
I mean, you talk to me sometimes, Sam, so I don't.
I talk to you every day, Matt.
Huh.
And you know, when I talk to Matt every day, you see, that's the first thing I see in the morning as soon as I start talking to him, is that smile. And I work to get that, because I'm understanding now at this point in my life that not only do I need to bridge the gap with him, but I need to bridge the gap with Bobby Peterson, with Laverne White, with me and Deb already understand each other, with Sandra, with Maurice. We've got to do what is necessary to lower down the temperature and then start really looking at each other in such a way that we begin to understand.
You gotta lower down a lot for me, Sam.
I know.
Oh, I know you know.
Yeah.
You're a hard person to bridge the gap.
I'm a very hard person.
Yeah. See, even Erica, you know the pain that I have to go through with him on a daily basis. But
There's no pain, Sam. I see you smile every day in that office.
so what more? I mean, we got a little bit more time. You guys got any more? We got anything from the comments?
No, we
Not the questions, but go ahead.
don't got much. We actually gotta head out right now.
Okay.
Matt, Erica, thank you so very much.
Well,
Thank you guys.
We really appreciated your time. And tell the auntie I apologize for your lateness.
it's okay. She'll understand.
Be at work tomorrow.
Thank
I
you.
will be. I'll be right in your office waiting for you. Don't you worry.
Be safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you
for having
guys
us,
so
guys.
much.
Yeah. Okay.
So closing comments from you guys.
Yes. Can I hear from Bobby Peterson, please? What's your closing comment? We're gonna go around.
Well, basically, I really think and I feel that people, even if you don't know them, you know, sometimes you see people in the street, and I was walking up one day and I saw this man, and he just had his head down, and I just said, you know, hello, how are you? You know, trying to lift him up, whatever was going on. I didn't want to get in his business or anything, but I think we have to realize that a lot of people just need a hello from somebody strange, maybe, that can get them and make things look a little better, that things aren't as bad as they are or they think they are.
Yeah.
And I try to do that every now and then. I mean, I don't go around to everybody and say, hey, how you doing? But if I can see that something's off, you know, if it's off, then I say hello. And hopefully that brightens somebody's day.
Amen. Mother White. You're muted.
I agree with him. Sometimes someone just need just a little smile from someone, and that will help to make their day. And also, I would like to say that I didn't know that there were so many. I know that there were a lot of people are born in different years, but I didn't know that the years had so many different generational names. Because when it said the generation for the generation of silence, and I really didn't do any homework on it, but I just knew how I had lived, and the generation silence fit me right to the T. And I just want to thank God for everyone that's been on here, and thank you and the pastor for letting me be a part of it.
Sandra.
I,
Hey, hola.
I want to say, number one, thank you. Number one, God, thank you, because God does everything perfectly. And God's a big planner, and God is amazing. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to say thank you also, God, for meeting Donna. Just thank you. And thank you, Donna, for asking me to join. This was a treat, and this was so much better than what I could have ever thought or imagined. I knew it was going to be good, but it was amazing, amazing, amazing. And I think we can probably really be here for another couple of hours, just being about how we each grew up, and the things that we were told, and the things we were told to be quiet, and the things that how we were told just to act and think. I mean, it's amazing, and it's fantastic, because all of that go with Jesus, just with God, and just letting him do it, So I got no words. I'm Dominican and I got no words.
Thank you, Sister Deborah.
I'll just echo that. Thank you for the opportunity. I think that everybody that watches this is going to take away some gems that I think it's really important that we started the conversation, that because of my background, I do believe that parenting and leadership starts in the home, and that whatever we sow seeds, we have to be very intentional in how we do it. And as we rear our children, rear our adult children, we just have to remember that, try to do it. We're not going to be perfect at it, but we've got to be servant leaders, right? And we have to remember that, again, we're here to steward our children, not to control them, that we're here to be humble, right? Some of the things that our parents didn't do, God bless them, but we could take away from that. We could take away, no secrets anymore. We could take away the fact that, we have to be more authentic and more transparent and more vulnerable. We have to be intentional about getting through to them, and getting through to them just means opening the conversation with no judgment. And then we have to remember that, no matter what our parents that are going to listen to this later, or adults, never give up on our kids. Like, I don't care, like, you hear so much about trans kids, gay kids, all this kind of stuff going around, because the world is so liberal now and just accepts everything, that love is thicker than blood, and create an environment of peace and joy. And if we can do that as parents and allow the Lord to lead us through the Holy Spirit, we'll be okay on the other side.
Thank you.
Well, I think it was a very rich conversation tonight, from various perspectives about upbringing. I think the way that that resonated with me is just that we need to have the openness to continue this conversation. It just shouldn't be a one and done conversation, but in your families, your parents and children, adults, and everyone should still start to break down those barriers and have those tough conversations, because that's how we're going to be able to talk. So we need to start speaking, communicate with each other, and not via text, but it goes back to the old sit down at Sunday dinner, and you start having those conversations. And it wasn't that you had an agenda. it was just you started talking about it. And I think that's what we get. It's not going searching for things. We just, once people feel comfortable, they'll start to open up and share how they're feeling. And then that's how you continue to grow. So I think that hopefully we just have the openness that will continue along the journey.
Sam?
I'm very thankful to everybody who came on tonight. I'm going to try to use this conversation further. So I want everybody to sign disclosure agreements. You're probably going to see this and probably a lot of other different. I believe that everything that we said tonight is valuable and can be used for the upbuilding of the kingdom of God, because we have to begin to break down this difficulty that we have found ourselves in this communication, because we're not going to live forever down here.
Right, right.
And we need to continually, generationally learn from each other and value each other and understand that we need each other in order to be successful.
Mhm.
And I needed for you guys to be here. You were here. You contributed gems to my life. I'm really gonna probably look at this thing probably about 2 or 3 more times to see and hear and look at your faces, your mannerisms and everything else, because I communicate from, a couple of different fashions. I want to see the head shakings and the eyes and everything else.
Mhm.
So that way it's going to give me more of an understanding. So I thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate everybody for allowing us back in home for an extended version today. And blessings to you.
And as per usual, I like to leave us with something to ponder. And this quote is this: in each generation, there is this certain wisdom of the ages that gets reburied in the fleeting dribblings of modernity. Then, like a diamond in the rough, it is yet again unearthed by a very small minority who not only restores it, but also polishes it and presents it as something new, something highly valuable and refreshing as understood by the current. End quote. What I do think that means is that we can each take from each one and we can take it, use it, and make it better for the next. So, God bless y'all. For me, the Jesus loving Jersey girl, the licentiate, and Dr. Sam, we love y'all. We out.
Bye. Adios.